is a letter from Councillor Cassidy, and she's here today, so maybe I'll have her lead this off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for welcoming me to your committee and allowing me to speak first. And so, and with your indulgence, I would skip to the bottom of my letter and begin by saying we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Attawandaron, and Lenape Indigenous peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties, including Treaty 6, the London Township Treaty. So I won't read my letter, but I will just say that this is something that I've been working on for a while. I wanted to make sure that I got it right, and that's why I included the added documents, the previous council directions that we have given, as well as a letter of support from Chief Leslie White-Eye. I have consulted with other members from other First Nations communities, and Councillor Park has always been a big supporter of this as well, which is why when I approached her for her support, she was 100% on board. So I'm very proud to submit this with her and very proud to have her move this motion here at Corporate Services. I just want to say that acknowledging the traditional territory in this manner, and unfortunately, it looks like there's a bit of a typo in the subject line. The recommendation is that we commence every meeting of municipal council, and not the standing committees, unless somebody wants to change that. But when we discussed this, we thought the appropriate place would be at the every meeting of council. As it says in the letter, acknowledging this is a sign of recognition and respect for the people that have been on this land traditionally for hundreds of years before us, and who continue to have a presence in this land. So I'm really proud of this council for always taking more and further steps in this direction and working really hard on rebuilding and building and strengthening this relationship with the First Nations communities that we share this territory with. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, and I should have recognized that the letter was actually from Councillor Cassidy and Councillor Park, and Councillor Park is next on the list.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that this is something that's really important for us as a council to do, but not only just as a council, but a step forward for our community as a whole. I was at an assembly at my children's school fairly recently, and they've made their own policy within the Thames Valley District School Board to make this recognition at every single assembly that they have from here on out. Even our London Fringe Festival begins their festival with this recognition. And I think every time that members of our community, whether it's a business, a level of government, or individuals make this recognition, it truly speaks to the fact that we all have a role and responsibility in the healing process of the Truth and Reconciliation Report. So I see this not only as a one step in the healing process, but also as Councillor Cassidy just spoke of, is an incredibly important thing in terms of relationship building, because it's an incredibly dynamic and hard process, but this is one step of many that this council can take.
Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support this motion, and for several reasons. Some of the reasons have been mentioned here, and I was at the discussion that FCM coordinated, I believe it was in February, with our council, City Council, and some of the councils of the First Nations people, as well as staff. And it's clear from that conversation that this is the type of thing that we need to do. But also, over the past week, I've been in Ottawa last week with FCM, and we practiced this. We practiced this at our meeting, and we talked about it at the Aboriginal session on Saturday afternoon, and we started our meeting this way. And I think it's a lot of other places are doing the same thing. And I think it's a good way of doing it. I would like to just ask, why is it that we're not including the standing committees, though? Why just council? And I'll look for that answer. And I would also like to ask the mover and the seconder, if they would mind taking out the word "would like to." I never liked the word "would like to." I always feel that we should do it. In other words, we begin by acknowledging. I'd much prefer to see. They would like to mean it's not certain, it's not impactful. So I'm just asking if you would mind removing those 3 words and start, "we begin by acknowledging." That's my thought.
So there's a question, and maybe I'll go to Councillor Cassidy, Councillor Park can jump in as well on why just council. I think you addressed that a little bit in your statement, and a question about the language.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, through you to Councillor Usher for the questions. The decision, and as you can see from the subject line of the letter, originally I did have standing committees in there, and after some discussion, the decision was made to keep it at council because, just as we sing the national anthem only at council and not at standing committees, council is where we all come together as a body. And the standing committees are offshoots of council as a whole. So we want to speak with one voice, and that's why the decision was made for the council meetings. It is the most formal of our meetings. It is where all the protocol and all of that takes place. So the decision was made to really highlight the importance of this, that it happen at every meeting of council. And as far as the wording goes, I have no problem changing it to "we will begin." I guess "we would like to" is sort of more flowery language, and I understand your concerns about it being sort of wishy-washy. I have no problem changing it to "we will begin" by acknowledging. When I was doing my research, I went through a number of different organizations and things that do acknowledge the traditional territory at their meetings, and they almost always say "we would like to," and again, it's just I guess more flowery language, but I like the intent of being completely unequivocal that we will begin by acknowledging. I have no problem with that, but I'm not moving it. It will be Councillor Park.
I actually have, is this on this particular issue? I'll go to Councillor Park, because I said I'd do that, and then I have a speaker's list.
Great, I'm content with the changing of wording. I do think it's important that we do it at council. That's when we actually sit as government, standing committees. It's important to make that recognition for sure individually, but I think as a council as a whole, it's the most important part.
So we're going to make that adjustment, and we'll modify the motion just to, make reference to that we've changed the content of the letter slightly. We're also obviously dropping the standing committees portion in the current contemplation of the motion, but we'll get that up on the screen. I'll continue on with the speakers list, though. I have Mayor Brown.
Thanks very much, Chair. What I want to say is to the members that brought this forward, thank you. I think it's entirely appropriate for us to do that, and it's something that as I travel across Ontario and across the country and meet with other mayors, they tell me that they're doing at their councils as well. It sends a really clear message that we are committed to strengthening this relationship at the local government level. And it reinforces, I think, a great deal of work that this council has already done over the past 2 years, beginning with a meeting in December or January, right after the election. Councillor Cassidy attended, and then a number of events that have occurred since then. Council direction has been very supportive of establishing and reinforcing that relationship. This sends a really positive message. It's something also, colleagues, that I've worked into many of my remarks that I'm delivering on behalf of council out in our community, and I'd encourage you to consider doing the same as well.
Other colleagues? I'm just going to make a brief comment from the chair because I have no one else on the speakers list. So I'll be supporting this as well. I think it, certainly I want to echo what the mayor said about this council having a pattern of wanting to be both respectful to our First Nations communities, whether it's us flying flag out in front to recognize the anniversary of the London Treaty, whether it's the insistence through the One River and the planning processes for things like our environmental assessment to insist on engagement in a meaningful way with the our First Nations communities, and this seems to fit right in with all of that. So I commend the councillors for bringing this forward as well, and will be certainly supporting it myself as well. Any other speakers? Or okay, Councillor Helmer.
I think this is a very smart idea, and I hope that everybody supports it.
Okay, I have no other speakers. This has been moved and seconded. Seeing none, we can open this for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So I'm going to return to the top of the agenda, and that's item number 2, the staff report on alternatives for billboard advertising. We can put that up on the floor for consideration. You can see that it is a direction from staff. There's a report attached to it. I'd look to colleagues for any discussion or debate. Otherwise, we can open this for moving and seconding. I see none, so I'm going to open this for moving and seconding. Councillor Usher, or Helmer, sorry.
Thank you, and certainly I support the approach that's being recommended. I think it's reasonable. We do need a bit more information. I think this is the appropriate way to send this out for RFP. I think that's good. It's too bad that Councillor Van Holst is not here. I'd like to hear what he has to think, what he has to say about this particular approach, but perhaps we'll hear from council.
Actually, I think Mr. Hayward could probably comment on the engagement that Councillor Van Holst might have had with this. I don't know if he's seen this report, but I think when we gave the direction, it was clear that it came from Councillor Van Holst and that he would likely have some feedback into the process. So if there's any comment you'd like to make, you can do that now.
Through the chair, I don't necessarily want to speak for Councillor Van Holst, but in the discussions that we had with him, he seemed to be satisfied with the approach that we were taking.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll open up for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
It's not quite 12:30 yet, which is when we have the scheduled item, so I'm going to proceed with number 4, which is Association of Municipalities of Ontario Health Task Force. It is a request from Councillor Helmer, who will be serving on that task force to have the committee's support and regular request for reimbursement. So I don't know, Councillor Helmer, if you want to make any comments while we open this up for a mover and a seconder.
I sure do. The first meeting of this task force is happening right now, and I was on there for the first 2 hours from 10 till noon. It's currently happening, and here I am at committee. My expenses so far are 0 because I was participating by teleconference. I'm not sure how often I'll travel to Toronto, but if I do, I think it's appropriate to have it covered this way. Hopefully people will support that. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a little concern about this, and maybe Councillor Helmer could help me out. I'm always the first one to support us participating in committees and our association, our municipal and federal association. But this one seemed to be directed to health. And I wonder if this is more geared towards the London Middlesex Health Unit rather than council. Because when I read it, it seems to me that it doesn't have anything to do directly with City Council, it more has to do with health. So could you help me understand it through you, Mr. Chair?
Councillor Helmer.
What it is that we are going to benefit from this? This is my question.
Okay, a couple of questions there. So first, it's an AMO task force, and so AMO's members are municipalities, and so they're looking for representatives from municipalities, not from public health organizations. Certainly the Middlesex London Health Unit is one of the few autonomous health units, and there were some people who are from health units that are integrated into municipalities, so from the region of Waterloo, for example, on the staff side and both on the elected side. As it happens, I am also the chair of the Middlesex London Health Unit. So in terms of why is there a municipal task force around health, I can give you a sense of some of the topics. We talked about EMS, which municipality funds. We talked about public health. We talked about mental health. We talked about community drug and alcohol strategies, opioid addictions, all the kind of pieces that we're dealing with here in the City of London, many of which we're funding either in whole or in part in partnership with the province. So it's a new thing for AMO. It's certainly a new area. It's a task force. I can tell you that the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care seems to be quite happy that AMO has set up a task force because there's increasingly more and more issues that are touching municipalities, and they don't really have a framework for how to engage municipalities at the provincial level, so they appreciate that AMO has moved in this direction. In terms of the benefits, I think it remains to be seen how we can influence provincial policy. That's really the focus of the task force.
Yes, Councillor Usher.
Well, I hear what you're saying. If this was a standing committee, I would ask pretty much the same question. But it still seems to me that this is more to do with the health. And I'll be brave and ask you have you considered approaching the London Middlesex Health to do this? Because it seems to me that the benefit will be for the London Middlesex Health Unit. And I wonder if you were not on the London Middlesex Health Board, if you would still want to be a member of this task force. I'm asking the question, I'm not questioning it. I need to be able to understand that. So I don't know if you could answer that question. I just don't know if you were not on the London Middlesex Health Board, would you still want to be a member of this task force?
I can ask Councillor Helmer if you'd like to answer that.
Sure, yes, I would. And I haven't asked the Middlesex London Health Unit to cover the expenses. It's not an appointment of the Middlesex London Health Unit. It's because I'm a city councillor. Then other elected officials who are on there, the deputy mayor of the city of Ottawa, the mayor of Bracebridge, a number of mayors of other municipalities. There's lots of members there, some of whom also have peripheral involvement through their municipality in their local public health units.
I'm going to go to Councillor Park.
Thank you. I think that this is entirely appropriate for the municipality to cover these expenses, considering the capacity that Councillor Helmer would be working on. I also know that he's quite frugal, and I don't anticipate any high bills coming in, so happy to support this.
I have no other speakers. Okay, it's moved and seconded. We can open this for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-1.
On our added agenda, we have a staff report. This is the amending agreement for the London Community Players Loan Agreement. If you recall at council, we weren't able to just change the agreement on our own. We had to essentially draft a new agreement with the new information and language in it. Certainly, if there's any questions the committee would like to ask, but this is something that is coming back, I think, with everybody's expectation through council. So this is the new amending agreement. We can open that for a mover and a seconder. I'll look for a speakers list. Okay, it's moved and seconded. Anybody? Councillor Usher.
Can I ask? Through you, Mr. Chair, may I ask staff to just address this, give us a little bit more explanation of what I'm reading here, if there's any more?
Absolutely, and I know Mr. Yeoman is here, and I believe he's prepared to comment on this.
Yes, thank you through the chair. At the last meeting of Corporate Services Committee, the committee adopted a subordination agreement with Libro and the London Community Players Association for the $100,000 loan for the Palace Theatre improvements that were made last year. What this is doing is just aligning the values that are in that subordination agreement with the loan agreement and make an amendment to the original loan agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions from colleagues? If not, we can certainly open this for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, colleagues, we can't proceed with number 3 yet because we have about 7 minutes till I can do that. So I do have, we could certainly go to other deferred matters and additional business. We also have our confidential session, and as per my usual course of action, we could certainly do some more additional business after the in-camera at that point. But I think perhaps at this time, I could certainly call for any other matters or additional business that committee members might have. Seeing none, I actually have an inquiry that I'd like to make, so I'm going to switch chairs with Councillor Usher.
Additional business, Councillor Morgan?
So I think it should come as no surprise what I'm going to ask. At the last committee meeting, I had asked about for an update on the policy matter related to policy 18, subsection 17, which I've asked about a couple of times, and I believe that this meeting was the meeting that was indicated that would be aimed for. So I will again ask if there's any sort of update related to this matter.
Through the chair, and thank you very much to the member of council asking the question. And the short answer is yes. And in fact, I come bearing gifts, and my apologies, but I do have a report. And if it is the committee's pleasure, I'm happy to have it walked on. And it is a report that is literally hot off the press, and so I do apologize that we haven't had it ready for council before. I made the decision to prepare the report yesterday, and was not able to meet the added agenda. But again, I'm certainly in the committee's hands. I have a report, happy to share it, happy to take the committee through it at a high level. And I certainly appreciate that, given the timing of your receipt of the report, that if you know, members of the committee need additional time to digest it. So I'm at the will of the committee on that, but thank you for the question.
How does the committee feel? Any, you all prepared to accept it? Raise your hands. Okay. Okay, Mr. Zuliman. Councillor Helmer?
I appreciate the city manager bringing this forward. I realize it's sort of a last-minute walk-in, a recommendation, and I wonder if in accordance with our policy, we could just take a brief recess. It's 16 pages. I think we all need to take a look at it before we really do anything, so we do have a policy that says we take a recess when we receive a last-minute walk-in like that.
So there's been a request to take a recess. We have 2 minutes to our 12:30 appointment. How about doing that, and then we call a recess at that time? or we could, whichever you prefer. If you want to do it now, that's okay.
Sure, if you want to table this matter and go back to the previous matter, and then that's fine.
Okay, I will, I'd like some agreement to go on to the 12:30 appointment before we do take the recess.
Motion to defer until after the PPM.
So I look for a motion to defer until after the PPM.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any discussion? No? Okay, we'll vote on this.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Colleagues, I'm not going to start even 1 minute early, so and now my clock says 12:30, so I'm prepared to begin the scheduled item, which is the tax adjustment agenda. This is a public participation meeting. You have the items in the tax agenda in front of you. This is something that we do on a regular basis. So I'm going to proceed with opening the public participation meeting on this item. And we can vote on opening the PPM.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so this is the public participation portion of the tax adjustment applications and agenda. I don't see anyone in the upper audience. I don't know if there's anyone below who wants to comment on this. Although we're not required to, I usually ask 3 times, so I'll just see if anybody else wants to comment on this. And finally, one last time, if there's anybody who wants to comment on the public participation portion of the tax adjustment agenda. Seeing none, I will open a motion to close the PPM. And we can vote on that.
Councillor Helmer? Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so we now have the recommendation before us related to the tax agenda items. We can open that for mover or seconder. Is there any discussion on this, colleagues? It's open for moving and seconding. Moved by Councillor Usher, seconded by Councillor Park. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll open this for voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Now we're back to the matter that we just deferred, so I'm going to hand the chair back to Councillor Usher. I'll let him govern any sort of action the committee wants to take on next steps.
We are going to put up a motion to recess. How much time do you need? Councillor Park?
I think 15 minutes would be generous.
Let's put 15 minutes. Okay.
Sorry, I keep doing that.
Councillor Ridley? Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so we're recessed. We'll convene at just before 10:02. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. Just. Okay, so yes, I'm calling the meeting back to order after our recess. I'm going to hand the chair back over to Councillor Usher.
Okay, we're dealing with the item with the report from Mr. Zudema with respect to the section 1817 of the report. And is there any questions before I ask Mr. Zudema to address this? Okay, so Mr. Zudema, would you address this, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I will say at the outset that this is the current information that we have that's been available to me at this time. And I want to thank a number of colleagues who've been very involved. I think it's been 3 weeks since this request was made, and I have an appreciation for what it must be like at the North Pole these days, because the elves in London were very busy. And I would say that I think that most of the information in the report is factual, and a lot of the information in the report, in addition to being factual, is historical. And a lot of the information in the report probably predates most of the people in this room. And the report is a compilation of information that has been provided to me by various members of the administration who've been working on this matter. And in that context, depending on where the discussion of committee goes, we might need to get back to you with more information at a later date. But I will say again, I very much appreciate the work that staff have been doing on this. They've been working extremely hard in keeping with a number of other projects that obviously we've had in the last 3 weeks, and had people, in fact, working on the weekend on this, doing research, having meetings, emails, etc. So what I'd like to do is take you through the report at a very high level, and I appreciate that members of council have read it. We start out with obviously the direction that council had to come back on this matter. And I guess the nub of the answer is in the second paragraph of the executive summary, which basically suggests that section 1817, as it is on the website, doesn't reflect a resolution of council, and accordingly isn't a policy that was approved by council. And then we go into some of the detail, and then what I immediately take you to is an item at Appendix 8, which is the last resolution that was passed by council that deals with the same subject matter that appears to be indicated on the website at 1817. And so I will note, I'm not going to read that section, but I will note to you that that most recently approved policy relating to this area was at a point in time when we had a board of control. And if you look at the various positions that are indicated, I think we can agree that a number of the positions that are listed at that point in time are different from those that we have today. I'm going to carry on to the third page of the report. My apologies, they're not numbered. The third page starts with an item in G in brackets. I'm just going to reference that over time there was a hard copy manual of council policies, and near the bottom of that page, the third paragraph from the bottom, the civic administration has found 2 versions of 1817 contained in the hard copy policy binders dating back to 2000, and those 2 copies have been included in your package as well. Moving over the page onto page 4, I will note that at one point in time back in 2001, there was a draft report that was prepared by staff, and that draft report proposed to amend some of the sections, some of the provisions in section 18 of the manual. including a proposed amendment to 1817. But our research indicates, however, that although there were some subsequent discussion about that item, that report was never brought forward for council's consideration. And so, so then we transitioned from the manual to a website manual in 2002. There was a new manual released, web-based, and so I'm just going to carry on a bit more. Near the bottom of that page, and now I'm at the bottom of what is page 4, and I'm about 1/4 from the bottom of the page, and I'm reading, the website version of 1817 attached at Appendix C is different from both versions of 1817 as contained in the hard copy manual. And then we have a reference to a number of these various iterations of 1817, and I think the substantive 2 paragraphs are at the bottom of that page. With the exception of Appendix A, which is the most recently approved council policy of 1817, with the exception of Appendix A and Appendix B, none of the other versions was ever approved by council. And then, so then I guess the headline for Daryl tonight, the impact is that the civic administration, sorry, Daryl, I just wanted to make sure you're awake there. The impact is that the civic administration has been relying on incorrect versions of 1817 since at least the year 2000. Okay, and I'm not making this glib. It's not a laughing matter, obviously. I'm very concerned about it, and I will indicate to you that we're gonna fix this, and we're gonna take steps, and I've already taken steps to ensure. So then we move over to the next page, page 5, which becomes a bit of a rhetorical question. Can council policy be amended without council direction and approval? And I think very definitively the answer is no. Staff do not make decisions of council. There are certain specific methods and modes by which council makes decisions. And in the absence of that, we might have folks that have good intentions, that are looking to assist, but the good intentions of staff are not a replication for decisions of council and the appropriate manner in which council decisions are made. Then still at the top of page 5, changes to the civic administration bylaw. Now, what I think is also noteworthy for you is that when council acts and positively does something, so when you pass something and you pass a policy, that makes a statement. But what also is important is what happens when council changes or deletes something. And what's very important, the material on page 5 is extremely important, I think, to your thought process of where we land on this, because a lot of the previous responsibility of the council was deleted from the civic administration bylaw, and that material is included at page 5 of the report. Going on to the last page of the actual report, page 6, a 6-page report, obviously with appendices. The impact of the changes, and this is where I would suggest that with the elimination of the Board of Control, with the changes that were made to the civic administration bylaw that are indicated on page 5 of the report, I think it's fair to say that staff took the perspective that 1817 of the manual was redundant and no longer applicable. I will note that where there are statutory officers that are indicated in various pieces of legislation, and we have a number, it's not just the Municipal Act, we have and we continue to appoint those individuals in their statutory capacity through bylaw, and I'm not in any way suggesting that we change that practice. And so in terms of conclusions, again, 1817 on the website doesn't reflect a resolution of council. It's not a policy of council. The last version that was authorized by council was from 1982, as was indicated earlier in the report at Roman numeral 1. We appreciate that there is a need to review all of council's policies, and I apologize. I know the councillor that raised this placed some reliance on what was on the website. I think people should be able to have the comfort to be able to rely on representations that we make on something such as our website. Those things should be periodically checked and reviewed. Clearly, in my view, we had something up there that shouldn't have been up there. And what we want to do in terms of moving forward is fix this. And we do have an operations management team. And some time ago, we had, as a senior leadership team, asked that the operations management team review all of the city's policies. That is a process that has been going on, and it continues. But obviously, as it relates to this, this issue has raised the need for us to put a little more steam and effort into that initiative. And I have suggested, as recent as the weekend, that if we cannot readily identify an appropriate council base for something on our website that's a policy, if we can't quickly do that, we should take it down and then rebuild that as we have confidence that the sections that we want to put on the website have been appropriately passed by council. So that's a bit of a whirlwind tour, Mr. Chair, and I won't take you to all of the various policies. I think the substance is the matter of which ones have been approved by council, which have not, and I'm happy to try and entertain any questions you might have.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you, and certainly I appreciate taking the recess first so we could process some of this, and I think it's helpful to have this information from Civic Administration. I just want to clarify a couple of things, so through you, I just ask a couple of questions. So 1817 obviously had various iterations, some of which were approved by council and some perhaps were not approved by council. In all of those iterations, is the city engineer somebody who's required to be appointed by council?
The policy 18, if we look to page 2 of the report, it would depend on one's interpretation. And this is where the current civic administration bylaw also kicks in. And so I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I may be conflicted in answering that question. I have what I view to be an answer to that question, but I think that you should have, and again, I think you made an opinion from that other than myself.
Okay, 1817, the most recent version, let's say it's this one from 1982, it's not been repealed, it's still on the books, right?
Hear the question?
It hasn't been repealed, it's still on the books.
It's still on the books, but one might question whether the essence of its purpose is redundant by virtue of other actions that council have taken, which may in fact put the core of the policy at odds with subsequent policy that has been approved by council.
Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. So first off, I want to say thank you for the work that's been done and all of those who've been involved in preparing the background information on this. I know it certainly was no small task, and I'm glad to see that we have a report in front of us today. I certainly never mind a walk-on. I like to have things as quick as possible so that we can move forward as quick as possible. And when we say we are going to fix this, you know, with that most respect, I see an important role that council has in clarifying these particular policies. For me, I'm glad to see that multiple versions of the policies make reference to council's authority to appoint a number of individuals. I hear the comments on the civic administration bylaw. I certainly think that a number of us have interpretations of that bylaw. The other thing that I've done in the meantime with my own research on this is look at other references in our bylaws and our policies to things like the appointment of senior leaders. And I came across a number of bylaws, I won't list them all, but the drainage bylaw lists the city engineer as the person appointed by council to the position of city engineer. The heavy loads on roads bylaw, general manager of environmental and engineering services and city engineer shall mean the person appointed by council. Streets bylaw, city engineer shall mean the person appointed by council, and it goes on. And so not only is this in our standing policy, it is strewn within a number of our bylaws that we contemplate and have in the past appointed the city engineer particularly. And I am of the view that there's value in appointing all of the senior leadership team, which is why I brought the communication forward at the time that I did that was part of the impetus of the position that we're in today. So in clarifying this, you know, certainly I think that council has a role in clarifying how we would like to move forward with appointments in the future, and that is what I was asking to do. Now, this has been dropped on us today. I want to hear what the rest of the committee thinks on this, and you know, I'm not necessarily going to move a motion at this exact moment with respect to this, but I wanted to add some of that context for the research that I had done in the interim as well, on where there are references, and certainly I'm pleased to see the results that. You know, although it may not have been technically the exact copy of the policy, we do have a standing policy on record that confirms the intent that I wanted to, and the path that I wanted to go along. Again, interpretations of the civic administration bylaw aside, I think that it's clear to me that these are appointments that council should consider making, and I think we need to clarify that so that it is a definitive item, not a question. So those are my initial comments based on the feedback, but I do want to thank those who did the work on preparing this particular document.
I have Councillor Helmer and then Councillor Hubert. Anyone else? Okay.
I was just trying to get your attention that Councillor Hubert wanted to go. Go ahead.
It's not often that I get waves from the other side of the council chamber. Thanks, Councillor Helmer. You know, I think a couple things as I read this report and as I've reflected on this over the last, and I think we have to be careful through you, Mr. Chair, of phrases like interpretations of the civic administration bylaw aside. It's still an important document, but I think what my colleague raises is, and I think it's very clear through Mr. Zudema's report, is there's interpretations and there's misalignments of bylaw and policy. And without going into the weeds too far, and I think Councillor Morgan has mentioned several, that there's a historicity to some of these things that are lagging behind the changes that we made. And I will say, as the Vice Chair of the Governance Task Force that brought about the removal of Board of Control, that task force never undertook, nor did it give direction, in my recollection, to administration to clean it up. And we seem to be finding that we're cleaning up references to an entity that no longer exists now 6 years after that. So I think I take Mr. Zudema at his word that he's going to get it fixed and we're going to get these policies aligned. But at the end of the day, they only become policies when, to Councillor Morgan's point, they only become policies when council adopts them, excuse me. So we've got some work to do. And sometimes it's there can be two views and they're both right. It's just a matter from which perspective you look at them from. And I think that's somewhat of what we're dealing with here, is if you look at one way, you can see it from that perspective. You look at it from the other way, you can see it from that perspective. And that's true of interpretations, and we all come to that. So I'm pleased with the report. I'm also pleased that we're going to take some action steps to move forward and get the clarity. I think that's helpful to administration. That's part of good, effective, and efficient administration. It's also a part of good, effective, and governance from a council perspective. So those would be a few of my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to have to leave because I have a emergency appointment, but can Councillor Ridley take the chair for me, please? And we have Councillor Park speak next.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I think that this report has certainly outlined a point of concern, and I appreciate the fact that we'll be going through a review, and I think that that should certainly be a top priority. Each one of these policies not only guides the work of civic administration, but also council, and when we have policies that are out of date or not in effect, we have situations just like this come forward. So appreciative of the report, thinking that it is certainly a top priority to get that review done. And in terms of the genesis of this conversation, I just would think that there is some value in council taking a recommendation from the city manager to appoint a member of this individual in particular. And it's a nomination process, and that way the swim lanes are clear in terms of the city manager's ability to do his job and council to do our job as the governing body.
Councillor Morgan.
So I appreciate the comments of my colleagues. I want to go back to part of the genesis of this, which was the communication that I put forward, which made reference to 1817 in its introduction. And the two particular changes that I wanted to make, which obviously can be put on the floor and amended by council or committee at the time, was to appoint Ms. Schur as our new city engineer. And then direct civic administration to report back to the Corporate Services Committee with proposed amendments to the relevant bylaws, policies, procedures to enact a bylaw for appointments of the senior leadership team. In other words, to Deputy Mayor Hubert's point, there isn't clarity here, and I don't mean to say, notwithstanding the interpretations of the civic administration bylaw, and quite frankly, my original intent was to clarify all of our policies and bylaws to bring them into alignment with what I believe is my preference in how to move forward as a sitting member of municipal council. And I completely respect that other members of this council may differ in opinion from the direction that I want to go. But I certainly reserve the right as a member to make a suggestion on a direction, to have that fully and wholesomely debated, and to move forward with a clear and concise direction. And so I just want to point out that my original intent here was to clarify this across all of the relevant policies and bylaws, also adding in, my preference on how we would proceed. And certainly my preference was based on reading Chapter 18 in its current iteration. It doesn't change reading Chapter 18 of the 1981 version. In fact, it's strengthened today by some of the other research that I've done at this particular point. So again, what I don't like doing is throwing motions up in a reactive way. And so I'm debating today how I'd like to proceed. And I certainly know I would have the ability to raise this at council now that it's been raised here. I have no intent at this particular moment to bring back up my particular communication, because I do want to digest this. I want to incorporate it into the research that I've done, and I want to come up with a constructive, effective path for council to move forward with. And I may do that at council next week based on this direction, or I may bring it to the subsequent Corporate Services Committee meeting in the form of a communication, because I think it's important for council to decide the direction that they want to go on this. And then all of the policies and changes and work to align our policies can happen. But the one thing that's been clear from the presentation is that policy is not going to change without council direction, and that it is council's right and authority to make those changes, and it is our responsibility to do so. And just because the civic administration was operating under some policies that were not accurate is not necessarily their fault. It is council's responsibility to oversee these policies, and that's what I would like to clean up, and I'm going to do so at the appropriate time. I appreciate the dialogue today. I appreciate the walk-on report, and that's how I myself am going to proceed. Is I'm going to go away today. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to reflect on my motion. I certainly am still committed to it, and I will bring it back in the appropriate form at the appropriate time, which I don't think is right now without the public knowing that it was going to come back today in this form.
I'm looking for other speakers and not seeing one, so what I'm going to suggest is that I put a motion to receive up, and that will allow the counselor to come back at another point in time, but we do need to receive the report in front of us. So we'll get that up on the screen for a mover and a seconder. That's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on the motion to receive? Seeing none, we'll open the vote. This time I'm going to go back to my spot and invite Councillor Chair Morgan back to his spot, and I believe he can resume the meeting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Colleagues, with your indulgence, and maybe I can just do this one from the chair because it's not my inquiry because we're still on additional business. Councillor Salih, who wasn't able to be here today, asked me to just make a brief inquiry, and maybe the information can be brought back to council. I don't like putting people particularly on the spot on things that I'm not knowledgeable on myself. But Councillor Salih had asked me if we could have an update, and he's asked this once before, on the matter of the size of the Police Services Board. There was some direction given previously. There was some contemplation of engaging with the board in some way. We're not really sure where that is, but I know that Councillor Salih would enjoy an update to that. He couldn't be here today, but he asked me if I could make that particular inquiry. I'm certainly open to comment today, but I think the most appropriate thing would be to hear back at council so no one's on the spot.
Thank you very much for the question, and a report has been prepared. Apparently it's been on a deferred list, and so in preparing the report, we're just going to realign a little bit where that report's coming from, and it will be coming back to you at the next committee meeting. So it will be here before the end of the new year. We had a request from the police chief about the status of that matter as well. And as I understand it, and you'll see when the report comes forward, that in keeping with the litigation that we had recently, that the matter had not been moved forward. So I did have an indication of interest that had come to me from the chief about this particular matter. And so I intend on meeting with him this week, if I can, to advise him that this matter will be coming up in the next cycle.
Thank you very much. I'll let Councillor Salih know, although I know he can watch the video as well. He's pretty good with the technology. So we're on to the confidential session, and we have C1 through C4. There's one added on the added agenda. The other ones were on the public agenda as reasons to go into camera. And I have the mayor who wants to be on the speaker's list, so go ahead.
Thanks. I'd let the chair know just before the meeting that I had an additional added item that I wanted to, I'll read it to you. I think that the deputy clerk also has a copy of it that can come up on screen. Matters pertaining to employee negotiations and personal matters involving identifiable individuals, including the municipal employees with respect to employment-related matters, and advice and recommendations of officers and employees of the corporation, including communication necessary for that purpose and for the purpose of providing instructions and directions to officers and employees of the corporation.
So that's just going to be added on as an item. It'll all be together. If there's no objections from the committee, we'll just do that all at once. Okay, I see none. So that'll all come up together as our reasons for going into closed session. And when it comes up, we'll have a mover and a seconder and a vote. I don't see any discussion on this. Oh, I do. Councilor Ridley?
Thank you. Just a request that we have about 5 minutes before beginning the in-camera matters.
Sure, no problem. We'll do that. It takes time to shut down the system anyways. So moved and seconded, no other discussion. We'll do a vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0. And for the purposes of clarity for the public, in terms of the reasons for in camera, it is for items C1 to C4 included on the added agenda, as well as the additional reason read by Mayor Brown.
Okay, and we're going to, because there's nothing else on the agenda, move to adjourn from that. We'll open the doors. We'll check to see if our media friends want to come in and see that adjournment and reporting out, and make sure there's no members of the public here waiting. So we'll be in committee room 3.